Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of the Asian Tales. This podcast is meant to share our life's journey being Asian with the experiences and realizations we've made along the way. The Asian Tales is a beacon for individuals to look towards. Today's guest is the amazing V Vo. V is the current Miss Asian America and a Vietnamese immigrant. She shares her heart to the world while describing what it was like moving from Vietnam to the US at a young age and the importance of language to her, both Vietnamese and English. From her grandma saving up enough gold for her uncle to leave a country dealing with war, to classmates making fun of her for having a Vietnamese lunch at school, she tells her tale. Hello, V. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome on. How are you doing today?
Hi, Diamond.
What's it like over in California, right? You're in California, right?
No, here is what's going on. So I'm actually from Anaheim, California, but I'm currently working in Arizona because my partner is here. And so I am working as a physician assistant at an urgent care, and the office is located in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay. But you're originally from California, is that?
Yeah. Well, I was born in Vietnam, but I moved to California. So I was born there in Vietnam, and my family and I decided to move to Anaheim, California, where my grandparents are, when I was about 9 years old. So we lived there for a few years. Then I moved to Florida and stayed there for about 10 years. So I did my middle school there, high school, college, and I also did my PA training there. So for a long time, my plan is to eventually one day move back to Anaheim. I'm in the process of getting like a house with my dad because he's there right now. So eventually I want to move back there, and I want to help the Vietnamese community there because there's a very large Vietnamese community in Anaheim, California. So eventually I'm going to move back, but right now I'm still with my partner and we're still living in Arizona.
I didn't know that you were from Vietnam. I feel like that's crazy since we've just spent like the last, 3 months getting to know each other. I didn't know you were from Vietnam.
Yeah, I was actually born there. I lived there for 9 years, so that's a long time. So
you grew up speaking Vietnamese.
Yeah, I did. So that's why I'm very fluent in both Vietnamese and English. I do speak a little Mandarin Chinese too. And I know you speak a little Mandarin Chinese, right?
Yeah. Not enough to have like a political debate with someone, but enough to survive.
Yeah. I'm sure we can try to have a conversation later. We'll see how much I can understand.
Oh,
I'm sure your
goodness.
Mandarin is better than mine.
So, do you speak Vietnamese when you moved to Anaheim with your family? Did you speak Vietnamese primarily in the household at
I
home?
still do now because my parents, they don't speak a lot of English. And so even now I speak Vietnamese with them all the time. So that is how I am able to keep my fluency.
Mm-hmm.
And I utilize that with my patients as well, believe it or not. So it's very helpful being bilingual and keeping that traditions and keeping that language, because oftentimes patients come to me and they don't speak English very well, and we don't have a translator in our clinic. So being able to speak Vietnamese, it's just great for them.
The area that you're at have a big Vietnamese population?
Yeah.
Really?
Surprisingly, yes. Yeah. In the Phoenix area, there's a very large Vietnamese community. And I'm actually trying to get more in touch with them to do a lot more events with them and be more involved with like the activities here with the Vietnamese community in Arizona. Surprisingly, when I first moved here, I didn't know that there was such a large Vietnamese community here. Then I reached out to some people and I found out that like, wow. And seeing patients too, Vietnamese patients. And I was like, wow, like I didn't know that there were so many Vietnamese people living here in Arizona. Because mostly it's in California or Texas
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
Orlando in Florida. So that was surprising.
So since you said that you speak Vietnamese with a lot of your patients who come in and you have a big Vietnamese population, is it people that have moved from Vietnam that are there, or first generation individuals primarily in that area?
It's a mix of both. Some have moved here a couple years ago, and some have lived here for a long time, but they just never really, I mean, like, even if they are able to understand English on a conversational level, it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
understand these medical terms, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, so for me, like at first, when I first started, I was like, I need to look up all these medical terms. How am I going to say kidney in
Yeah,
Vietnamese?
yeah, yeah.
Right? And so luckily, I lived in Orlando for a long time when I was doing my training for PA school. And
Mm-hmm.
I volunteer a lot. So I was exposed to a very large Vietnamese population there. And so I was able to pick up these medical terms and learn these medical words and translation. So that really helped me a lot. But before any of this, I was like, I don't know. I can speak with you. I'm not going to be able to translate, like, hey, you have
You're
both
like
these.
using loose slang for terms. You're like, you know what I mean, right?
And they're like, yeah. If you know English, like it's hard to understand like
Yeah.
you have to explain to your patients using layman's terms for them to be able to fully understand, because not
Mm-hmm.
everyone, I mean, same thing with other careers, like my friends who are in finance or accounting, and they're trying to explain, you know, what they do and what's going on in their office. And I'm just like, okay, like I understand these words, but it's hard. Yeah.
No, I totally get. When I was living in China, I had to go to the Chinese doctor for female care. And I didn't know the words for certain areas, but I knew the slang words for certain areas. So I was trying to explain what was happening. And I was like, the slang word for this. And the doctor is just looking at me like, God, this lao wai.
Why?
Lao is like a term for foreigner just coming over
Oh,
into China. Because I didn't know, and I didn't know, excuse me, I didn't know how to get to a doctor's office that had an English speaking doctor. So I just went to the nearby clinic, which was all Chinese and only had Chinese speaking doctors. And the university I worked for, my insurance covered me at this clinic. So I had gone so I could get free treatment. And I was just like, yeah, this word, like this. I was just going in for like a regular pap. I just needed a pap done.
yeah.
But I didn't know how to explain that without being very crude in my definition.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Just like thinking about you saying that, like a slang word for that. It's like, you know this. And then
Yeah,
doctor,
yes.
uh,
I'm very grateful. My doctor, she was awesome, and she totally got what I was saying. But initially, she was like, "Gosh, this foreigner." And then after that initial part, she's like, "Okay, okay, I understand what you need. Like, I got you, girl."
I got you.
I
But did she
know. Oh,
use, like the proper word?
she pulled it up on her computer for the translation, and then we just started using Google Translate for on there. Well, not Google Translate, they use Pleco or something else, but you know what I mean. Like, we just use the translating system because I was dying. My face was so red because I knew what I was saying. When you're like, you know what you're saying, and I'm just like, I'm trying to express this, but I have to use this really vulgar term right now to do it. Oh my god. Language is so important. I want to move back to you moving over from Vietnam when you were a kid. Why did you move? Why did you come over to Anaheim?
So a long time ago, before my mom met my dad, so my it all started with my uncle. So my dad's oldest brother.
Okay.
He actually came by boat. Like he escaped the country, escaped the war, because
Mm-hmm.
at that time they require him to join the army and be in the Communist Party, and then he just didn't believe in that and he didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
do that, so he decided to escape the country. Back then, this is just from stories that my grandmother told me, but you have to kind of bribe them. You have to give them gold,
Mm-hmm.
the ship owners, for them to kind of get you on the boat. And
Did you say
um,
gold?
yeah, like gold.
Sounds like a pirate's fee.
Yeah, like you have to like give them gold, like pieces of gold. Um, so my grandmother at the time, she was very poor, but she was
Mm-hmm.
able to save up like from years of saving. And back then, like, gold was very precious because gold never loses its value, even now.
Mm-hmm.
So she gave everything to him because, of course, she wants him to have a good life, and she doesn't want him to like die and go into the army and suffer. And so she was like, okay, like, here's all the gold I have, like, take it and give it to the owner so they can take you across the sea, you know, hopefully you can go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, he didn't know where he was going to go. So either like the Philippines or even like the UK or the US, wherever it is, what happens is that you go on the boat, this very small boat. It's not even like a ship. It's like this small boat. And they will take you in the middle of the sea. They'll try to go as far as they can. But if something happens and you get, you know, the boat is flipped or something and you get lost at sea, like, that's it. It's over. Like, you die. And, and,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and people have died on the ship. And it's crazy because my uncle was telling me the story. And he was like, it was so crowded, like this small boat with like hundreds, like maybe like 100 or 200 people on there.
Mm-hmm.
And some have like starved and died, and they have to like push them off into the ocean. And he was like, I've heard stories where my friend's ship, like, they had to eat the people who died because
Oh my
they were
goodness.
starving. Yeah, it's so scary. Of course he didn't do that, but he was like, yeah, my friends who like came after me told, you know, we like share stories with each other, and his
Mm-hmm.
book,
Mm-hmm.
people were eating other people because they were so hungry, like they were starving and they were stuck in the middle of the sea. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's the worst thing that could happen. And so luckily for him, he the boat like ran out of fuel, and they got stuck in like this island. And luckily at that time there was another ship from the Philippines who was like passing by. They saw him, and like all the survivors that were still alive, and they asked him like, hey, what's going on? And they explained their situation. We're trying to run away from our country, the war. And so they were able to be saved. Like, they went on the boat, lived in the Philippines for a few years. And then, you know, Americans, um, they they come to the Philippines to do a lot of work. And I think
Mm-hmm.
they offer a lot of like refugees an opportunity to come to America to live. So at the time, I think he lived there for a few years, and then he got an opportunity to go to the US because he was sponsored by one of the people there to come as a refugee. So he went to the US, he came to California, and he lived there. That's where he met my aunt. And then 10 years later, he called back to our family and was like, hey, if anyone else wants to go to America, let me know so I can do the paperwork, and I can do like
Mm-hmm.
chain immigration is what it's called, to sponsor for you guys to come over here and have a better future, have a better life. At the time, my dad was like, hey, I already have a life here. The war is over. I met someone. I'm going to start a family. And everyone else like didn't want to go. My grandparents were like, they were kind of like iffy, but they're like, okay, we'll go. So my uncle sponsored for my grandparents to go to America. And fast forward 10 years later, they asked my dad again, hey, this is the last chance. Like, if you say no now, you will never be able to go to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you think about like your family members, creating a better future for your children? So that's when my dad was like, okay, fine, like, I'll go. So my whole family like decided to uproot everything. At the time my dad was a driver, so he drove like tourists around,
Mm-hmm.
tours and stuff. And my mom was actually a teacher and an entrepreneur in Vietnam. So she was very successful. Like, she had her own company and everything, but then she had to like sell her company, uprooted her life so that we could go to America, for us, for my brother and I, to have a better future. So I came when I was about 9 years old, and my brother was 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm 26 and my brother is 21. I had to think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and then when we first moved here, it was completely different than what I imagined, because in Vietnam, you idolize these Americans so much. Anything from America that we get, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. I would get like hand me down by like from my cousins who are from America.
Mm-hmm.
And it would like make my day. I mean, they're hand-me-down, like they're just old clothes that they wore, they didn't want anymore. And it would make my whole year, because I'm like, oh my gosh, these clothes are made in America. It's so great. Like, it's the best thing ever. So growing up, I would like, I love those hand-me-downs from like, my cousins from America. And so I imagine America to be like, oh, this like great country, like amazing. We're going to live in like such a big house, because everything in America is so big, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's why my understanding was. So I was like, oh, we're going to live in this big house. We're going to like eat all the food we want, all these American food. We're going to have a great life there. When we got there, it was a completely different story. Of course, like reality hits. And like at the time, I mean, my grandparents sponsor us to be over here along with my uncle, but not everything was big and grand and like what I thought it would be. We came and we stayed, like my whole family, four of us, stay in just this one small room with my grandparents. And so it was a shock, because I was like, wow, like this is not what I thought it would be like. And my mom struggled a lot to find a
Mm-hmm.
job, and she couldn't find a job for a year because no one wanted someone who didn't speak English, you know? And that was a completely different experience for her, because coming from owning your own company, being an entrepreneur, having control over all these things, and going to a country where no one wants you to work for them. You don't have a job, you can't make money, you can't support your family. It was very tough. Excuse me. There were a lot of times when she cried and cries because my brother and I didn't speak English. We struggle a lot in school. My dad couldn't find a job either. So for a year, like we really just depended on my uncle's family to help us financially. So
Mm-hmm.
it was tough, and we all lived in this like only one bed, like one queen's bed in this room, and all four of us like took turns sleeping on it. Of course, like my mom and dad would like let my brother and I sleep on the bed, and they would sleep on the ground. But being 9, I still understood why they did that. And I was like, hey, like, let's take turns. I love sleeping on the ground, right? Like, I love like sleeping here and all that stuff. We never had toys. So I was just like, oh my gosh, this is completely different than Vietnam, and completely different from what I imagined America to be.
Did you
So
regret it when when you were in like your initial transitioning stage? Did you hate it?
I hated it so much because I didn't have any friends. And like for that year, I had to start school right away. When I moved here, like I was supposed to be in like or I was supposed to be in like 5th grade, or 6th grade, something like that, in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
But when I moved here, they had to put me in 4th grade, because that was like my, despite my age, like that was like, I don't know how to explain it. They just said that she needs to be in 4th grade so that she can develop her English and learn English before she could
Oh,
go to,
oh, oh.
yeah, it's like
Mm-hmm.
go to middle school. And I remember going to school, and I didn't know any English. I couldn't get, like, I had to pack lunch. At the time, you can get lunch at school.
Mm-hmm.
From a poor family, you can get either reduced lunch or free lunch. But
Mm-hmm.
since I didn't know how to speak English, like I didn't have anyone helping me, and I didn't have any knowledge about like, oh, you could get lunch at school. I thought we had to pay for it. And so I didn't like do the paperwork that's required to be able to be qualified for it. So I always pack lunch, and being an Asian family, my mom always packs like the craziest food.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
To pack like all these sauces, which is good for me. Like I love it. But like, to like foreigners, they're like, oh, like what is that sauce? Like no one wanted to sit next to me because I was eating like strange food. And being middle school, of course, like these kids, they don't understand. Like they're not
Mm-hmm.
like being inclusive, and they're not like, okay, let's like accept her and let's be friends with her. She's from a different culture. Like back then too. It was like in 2003 when we moved. So you can imagine, they're like, why is this Asian girl eating something so weird and smells so bad? And I'm just sitting here like, this is so good, like so yummy. And I'm looking around, everyone's like eating like Lunchables, like sandwiches, hot dogs, burgers, chicken nuggets. I was like, oh man, that looks so good. But I was like, okay, we probably can't afford to buy the lunch at school. So I never asked anyone, or I never asked my mom for money for the lunch. And I didn't know they were free either.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept like, eating lunch that's packed by my mom. I remember that there was a time when these kids would come and they would like throw the sauces, because my mom would pack the sauce in a different container, and they knew that it was like like the sauce didn't smell good or whatever. It didn't look good either to them. It looked weird. And so they would come and just like grab the sauce. They were throwing the sauce to each other. It was in this container and they were like throwing it to each other. And I was just sitting there like what the heck? Like I need this sauce to eat with my meal. But I just like felt so bad because they were just like making fun of me about it. I was bullied so many times in school because of what I ate. I didn't speak English. I was very quiet. So that whole year, I regretted being in America, moving to America. I asked my parents all the time, like, why did we have to move? I mean, this is not what I imagined. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have friends. People are making fun of what I eat at lunch. Um, I just like hate it here. We have to live in this small room. We can't go out to eat because we can't afford it. Um, we have to always like buy groceries and like cook in our home. We can't go out. We can't even go to McDonald's to buy food because we can't afford it. And my mom would be like, hey, I mean, even though she probably felt the same way,
Mm-hmm.
but she just like, I don't know. You know how Asian parents are. They're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
verbalize how they feel. So they try to hide everything. So they're like, my mom was like, it's okay. You get used to it. You'll pick up the English language really fast. Just keep pushing yourself. Keep going to school. Keep learning. Keep studying. And every day I would borrow like a textbook from school, from like the library. I would go home and try to study English. I was trying to push myself. I was able to pick up English and learn English like after a year. Like I was able to communicate really fast. After half a year, I was able to like communicate somewhat, but like after a year, that's when I was like more confident and I was able to make more friends. So the first year was like the toughest. My brother didn't have to go to school. He just stayed home because he was so young. He was like 3.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't have to have that issue. But for
And
me,
I
like,
guess when he starts school, they start learning English all at the same time, right? Like
yeah,
daycare, kindergarten, whatever.
yeah, he started kindergarten. So I'm like, they all learned the same
Yeah.
time. So he didn't have that issue. For me, I was like bullied so many times because of that. And I remember like being in math class because in Vietnam, I was supposed to be in like 5th grade. So in terms of math, I was more advanced.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like the teachers would have all these like problems on the whiteboard. And I knew the answers. Like I was like dying to answer. I'm like, these are so easy. Like I want to answer them so bad because when you get an answer right, you get a gummy, like a gummy worm.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like looking at that jar and I was like, oh my gosh, I want a gummy worm so bad. I want one because my parents aren't gonna buy it for me. And I was
Yeah.
like, I want the gummy worm. And in my head, like I knew the answers, but I didn't know how to answer them in English. So I was like, oh my gosh. I was dying. Um, so that was tough too. I was just like, man, like this is just really hard. So I like forced myself to learn English um quickly so that I'm
How
able
frustrating, too, especially
to.
since you're saying that your family can't afford these snacks and stuff. And you're like, I actually know that answer. Like, I know all of these answers. I just cannot communicate with you the way that you want to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like I think at the time, like, I'm sure if I asked my mom or my dad, like, hey, can we go to the store and can we buy that? Like, they would buy for me because they love me.
Hmm.
But, like, I knew, like, even at such a young age, like, I knew that I didn't want them to spend money on me. on something that's
Mm-hmm.
not needed, especially when my mom was sick and we needed money for something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, hey, the gummies in class are free. If I can get those, that's all I need.
Mm-hmm.
But for me not being able to answer them, I was like, oh my gosh, like I just have to study. I have to push myself and study. That's the only thing.
When did you suddenly realize you're like, hey, this isn't too bad. I'm doing okay. Like, this is fun. I've got friends. I'm going strong. I'm getting good grades. I'm going to go on to further my education. Like when did you suddenly realize that, like, oh, now I'm living a comfortable life here. Now I'm not on the lower end. I'm not being bullied for this. I'm not yada yada yada.
I think after a year, like after I learned English, after 1 year, I was able to stand up for myself. So, when the kids bully me for whatever reasons, whether it's my
What do you
past,
mean by bully? Do you mean like physically bully, verbally bully, like tricks played on you?
yeah, like tricks, like, when I was eating the lunch, they would throw the sauces to each
Mm-hmm.
other as a way to like make fun of me. Cause like, oh, the stinky sauce, like, here, you take it. No, you take it, like to each
Mm-hmm.
other while I'm sitting there like, hey guys, like, this is my lunch.
Those same
Right?
people are going out for pho on the weekends now and getting Vietnamese food.
Right. Hey, if they're watching this, they probably don't. But yeah, like just making fun of me, like, oh, she's eating such a stinky sauce. I'm sure like there were kids like at the time, it maybe it did,
Mm-hmm.
they are not able to understand that, but they're just throwing at each other like, I don't want it, you take it. I don't want it, you take it. Um, and then sometimes like they would say, call me names too, Um, I've been called racial slurs so many times. Even now, I still do. Like some of my patients would call me racial slurs.
Really? Like
Yeah.
what?
I had a situation where I asked this patient to leave because he was being very aggressive and combative to my staff members. And we're like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
if you're being rude like this and if you're being aggressive, we don't have to treat you. You should
Mm-hmm.
leave. And then he got really mad. I was just standing up for my staff. And he got really
Mm-hmm.
mad. He's like, you Chinese, and then call me the B word. Like, you Chinese B, blah, blah, blah. Go back to your country. Even
Yeah.
though he was like, he was like Hispanic, as he was
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic, and it just baffled me because I feel like as a person of color, he should be able to, empathize and
Mm-hmm.
be more understanding. But for him to call me that, I was just like, first of all, I was polite the whole time. I was like, first of all, I am Vietnamese and not Chinese, and it's very rude for you to say that and uncalled for. And please
Mm-hmm.
leave, our clinic, because we cannot tolerate something like this. And he
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't leave. He didn't leave until we had to call the police to escort him out. I know,
Wow.
it was so crazy. And I
Is
have all that all the time.
is there a Vietnamese specific slur? Because I know that I've heard of Chinese specific slurs. Rhymes with rink, starts with ch. That's the Chinese one
Oh,
that
I
I've
see.
heard.
Um, Vietnamese. I don't know any slurs in
Mm-hmm.
particular. I've, excuse me. I've been made fun of for just like a typical like stereotype, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
my parents, all they do is nails because that's all Vietnamese people do is nails. And I'm
Mm.
just like, what's wrong with doing nails? My mom is able to do that and make a living out of that and able to provide for me so that I can have a good future. What's wrong with that? It's still a
They
job.
make bank.
Yeah. My mom has her own nail salon now. She's able to
Mm-hmm.
support us through everything. I mean, yeah, we struggled the first few years a lot, but after she was able to pick up English and she's able to find a job as a nail technician, we were able to live very comfortably moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
We were in Florida, like we were able to live a comfortable life. Like, what's wrong with doing nails? But I've had a lot of kids and people who have made fun of me because they're like, oh, like, what do your parents do? Like, I bet they only do nails, like, stop it, kids.
You're like, yeah, my mom does your mom's nails. What you gonna do about it?
I bet your mom needs my mom now.
Yeah.
So I don't know of any like slurs in particular, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just a stereotype that, everyone will probably use um, against
Mm-hmm.
us.
Mm-hmm. What sort of advice would you give to young individuals who may be in a similar position that you were in? So more specifically, someone who maybe their English skills aren't as strong, they're trying their best, they're in this situation. What sort of advice would you give to someone like that? If you could give advice to your younger self, I suppose.
Yeah, of course. I think even at that age, I understood that only I can help myself. Only
Mm-hmm.
I can get out of this like misery, right? So you just need to tell yourself that, even though you're feeling like bad and you're like, oh, I wish this didn't happen to me. I wish I didn't move. I wish I
Mm-hmm.
was bullied. I wish I knew English. Instead of like wishing for that, you can change. You can do something to change that. For me, it was, hey, study harder. Go home instead of playing outside with your brother or doing this and that. Read a book, learn the words, take the time out, because if you dedicate that time now, you can enjoy it later,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what I tell myself. Growing up, even in PA school and college and high school, struggle now, make the sacrifices now, study now so that you can have a good life later, you can enjoy it later.
Mm-hmm.
So I would tell someone who is going through the same thing, struggling English, make that sacrifice instead of playing. I mean, I'm not saying like study all the time, but dedicate a little bit more time towards putting more effort towards that, reading that book, learning that English, so
Mm-hmm.
that it can help you later.
That can be applied to moving to any country, I suppose. If you're leaving and you're going into a country that doesn't speak English, but maybe you're moving to Vietnam or something like that, you just that little extra time will just pay off down the line in the future.
Sure. Even if I were to move to another country now and not know the language, like take that
Mm-hmm.
time out to dedicate towards learning the language, it's gonna be a big help moving forward, living in that country.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. All right, V, I think that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. I feel like I really got to know you today.
That's good. Thank you so much for interviewing me or having me on this podcast and allowing me to talk about my story. Because, like I said, I don't think I've shared my struggle as an immigrant when I first moved here with anyone. So thank you for allowing me to share that.
No problem. If our listeners want to get more of you, where can they find you at?
Well, I have an Instagram, so Vivo, so my first and last name.
Nice.
V, and then I just add the, I made a pun, Vivo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Vyvogue. And you can look me up, Vivo, on Facebook as well. So, and also Miss
Awesome.
Asian America Instagram.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You are running that now.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, V, thank you so much, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you, Diamond.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode. If you want to catch V's bonus mini episode, you can over on Patreon underneath the Asian Tales podcast. V participates in a fun Q&A segment. We hope to see you over there. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we will catch you next time.